what, people, places, things, and ideas of YouTube. Coming at you with another voiceover league, this time a voiceover league of a Jun Shadow league. It's one we had on stream the other day, but of course, knowing me, I forgot to hit record. So here we go. This is second best option we've got available. We'll see how it goes. This is the list that we ran. Some notable points of it. 2 main deck Liliana the Veil, a suggestion from somebody in the Discord. Got 4 main deck Dauthi, Voidwalker, 4 Shadow, 4 Ragavan, 4 Tarmogoyf, 4 Street Wraith. Or no, this one's only 3 main deck Dauthi. So 3 Dauthi, 4 Wraith. The 6 Hand Disruption spells, 2 Temur Battle Rage, a Dismember, 4 Lightning Bolt, 2 Fatal Push, or 4 Mishra's Bauble, 19 lands. In the sideboard, we've got 2 Chalice of the Void, great against like the Cascade decks, 2 Engineered Explosives, 2 Alpine Moon, Soul Guide Lantern, Veil of Summer, 1 Ancient Grudge, 1 Kroxa, 2 Terminate, 2 Turok, and a K Command. So, pretty similar to what we've been running fairly consistently. I think the only difference I really made with this list is I swapped out the 4th Dauthi for the Ren and 6 just to get some more games in with Ren, see how it felt. So let's take a look at the matches and see how it goes. We'll have the link to the deck list in the description right down below. As always, don't forget to come check out leagues whenever you want at twitch.tv/the_control freak, spelled just like in the YouTube description. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. This is match 1, game 1. We win the die roll. Got a hand of 3 fetches, Wraith, Bauble, Fatal Push, Dauthi. So reasonable hand. We've got some interaction. We've got a threat. We've got some ways to filter off the top of our library to perhaps find like a Tarmogoyf or a Shadow. Something like that. If we see a Fatal or like a Thoughtseize or Inquisition off the top, we can keep that. Bolt, I'm pretty happy to keep in the blind. Like, there's a reasonable chance that our opponent's going to play something that we want to interact with, and having that second removal spell can be pretty live. So just like right here. Now, technically, with our opponent playing the Mishra's Bauble there's a reasonable argument for like bolting after the first Surveil trigger with the Dragon's Rage Channeler. So if they had a second Bauble and they flipped something they didn't want off the top, then perhaps we could just catch them without getting that second Surveil. But typically I'd prefer just to wait. And then I was trying to decide between Bolt and Fatal Push. I decided because I've got the 3rd fetch land and can kind of wait on Revolt, that I'd rather just fire off the Bolt here, and then I can save the Fatal Push in case they get a Ledger Shredder. It's typically these blue-red Emery kind of artifact breach decks have Ledger Shredder. So get down Dauthi. Dash Ragavan here is a little unfortunate. Really would have liked to seen that Ragavan on turn 1. But not much we can do about that. And then, of course, Thoughtseize Bug. Immediately rip the Inquisition. So we see the Ragavan we just took. Dragon's Rage Channeler, Emery, Grinding Station. So because they didn't crack their Bauble, the Emery and the Grinding Station are pretty dead, and the Dragon's Rage Channeler the Dragon's Rage Channeler won't be live until they hit Delirium, which if the Dauthi sticks around, they won't. So I just take Ragavan as like the most imposing threat that they currently have. Cycle the Wraith. That lets me take that Dragon's Rage Channeler. So now I don't really have to worry about anything past this Urza saga. But I do need to find like a better threat than Dauthi to fight through this. So they choose to not play out the Emery and just make a construct instead. So us top decking a shadow here is huge, because now we can get down something that can potentially what's it called, abyss our opponents here. Especially since we already have this 3/3 unblockable Dauthi. And I don't know why they attack here. My guess is that they're under the impression that either... I don't think they are assuming I'm not running another shock land. But I guess they think that the damage is important. Like making me fetch and shock. But all it really does is set up the abyss mode on this shadow. Get them down to 6, play another shadow. Now they just have to crack these baubles for like very little grinding station value. So Emery, Shadow Spear is decent. But they can't equip it, which means that they're just on double chump mode. There's not really anything that I want to cast off Dauthi. I think it's just better as like a 2-turn unblockable guy right now. Alright. So what do we got? And opponent scoops. So, Dauthi did a tremendous amount of work in the main deck that game. Like, kept him off Delirium, kept Emery from running away, because we didn't see any extra removal. We just had to rely on shadows attacking through. So, that's one of the reasons that I've really liked it in the main deck of Jund Shadow. It gives you, like, some extra interaction you normally don't have access to. So, sideboarding... Board out a couple copies of Ragavan because of like Emery, their Ragavan's Unholy Heat, Dragon's Rage Channeler. They just stand in front of it pretty well. Board out a copy of Liliana with like the construct tokens and stuff. They can go wide. A couple Street Wraith, because it's with constructs, you don't really want to be like aggressively lowering your life total too much, because a single Urza Saga can just like swing around a single blocker. So you got to be a little conservative. Alpine Moon, I thought about bringing in, but ultimately decided that EE was probably going to be enough. Like, if I can just wipe out their board from going wide, they're not equipped to really set up like big construct tokens. It's more just the tutor part. So it's not like Affinity or Hammer Time or something like that, where you're looking at like 7/7, 8/8 construct tokens. Like, these are normally going to be 3/3s, 4/4s, and that's a whole lot easier to deal with. Board ends were like the 2 EEs, Ancient Grudge, K Command. Let's see, what else do we bring in? K Command, Ancient Grudge, the 2 Terminates, the 2 EEs, and the Soul Guide Lantern. And if you wanted to bring in the Alpine Moons, like if you thought Urza Saga was a big enough deal to worry about, then you could take out like the 2nd Liliana the Veil as a pretty good cut, or something like a Hand Disruption spell, and you'd be relatively fine there. Alright, so another hand with a Dauthi. We've got these 2 baubles to try to find some piece of interaction. But ultimately, we've just got like 3 good threats. And that's kind of where we want to be with Jund Shadow. We want to be like putting pressure on our opponent. See a lightning bolt on top, so I'm more than happy to keep that lightning bolt. Like, if they show a slow hand that isn't really doing anything, I can bolt myself and get down double shadow. If they just try to play like a fair game, I can bolt something, one of their creatures. Here, my thought is, as long as they don't have Spell Pierce right here, like, I'm pretty golden. Because if I can just bolt this Emery and untap and Wrenn and 6 down the Ragavan, then I'm not really afraid of much. Like, they got 2 cards in hand. I'm going to be able to, at the very least, double threat next turn. Get down, like, Shadow and Goyf or Shadow and Dauthi, something. So, Prismatic Ending on the Wrenn and 6 there basically means, like, I think this game is over. Get down Dauthi just to start nuking the graveyard. Yeah, and Ledger Shredder is just gonna hang out and do basically nothing. Like, I think I'm even gonna play around the connive here by only playing out a single Goyf and saying go. Because I just don't need the extra threats out. Like, he's already way into chump block mode. So now I think I just play out single Dauthi and pass. You never know if our opponent has something like land or free legendary. I don't even know what it would be, but like a 0-drop legendary that's white and or 0-drop legendary and Wrath of God. Then that would be a pretty big hit. So I'm 99.9% sure that they're not playing a 0-drop legendary card and Wrath of God. But it's basically free to play around there. Realistically, I think best case would be like Emery plus Archmage's Charm to steal a Shadow, but then they're still just dead to double Dauthi. So I don't really need to do a whole lot there to really push the envelope. So that was game 1, or that was match 1. Let's get match 2 up. On the draw, opening hand of Double Inquisition, Fatal Push, 4 lands. Pretty underwhelming hand. Like, especially out of Jund, I'd much rather keep a hand that's got a threat. The interaction's a little less important, but I need to have something that actually gets my opponent dead. This is better. It's got Ragavan and Goyf, plus a Blood Crypt. I'm on the draw, so I've got reasonable chances at another land. And I'm just going to discard that Temur Battle Rage here. If I see the second land, then Blood Crypt Ragavan into turn 2 Liliana can do a lot against an unfair matchup. So I kind of want to keep that in my back pocket. And then I had this discussion a little bit on stream when this league was live. If you know what your opponent is playing, and I know they don't have access to blue, it's a pretty good idea to just go like play your land, bolt their Ragavan during their combat step. But in the blind game 1, I don't know that they don't have access to blue. I don't know what they're playing. So if they just go Dark Slick Shores, Spell Pierce your Bolt, I'm blown out. Like, I'm in a really bad spot there. I know I can still untap and play Goyf or Ragavan plus Dismember, but they've got 2 mana on their turn. I've burned one of my removal spells. Like, it's not a good position for me to be in. So I can kind of play around the unknown by just bolting and hoping that my opponent doesn't have a second copy of Ragavan. Now going into like game 2 or 3, when I know that's not an issue anymore, then I'll start bolting on my opponent's combat step. But Just in that game one, I didn't feel like I needed to. So we got to take down this Liliana. We don't know if we're up against Jund Saga yet, or if it's just like traditional Jund mid-range. So like Bloodbraid Elf could be in play. Ah. Alright. So Dauthi is a pretty good draw. Means I kind of get the 4-1-1 before I decide on anything with this Ragavan. So we're just gonna take the Bolt or the Riveteer's Charm is like the best card advantage engine that they have. And then I don't want to just throw away this Ragavan, dashing it into a known Lightning Bolt. So we're going to kind of wait. They main phase cycle this Charm, so I'm kind of hoping that they just hit something like a creature they can play out and dismember. But they hit the Inquisition, which is obviously a little unfortunate because I would have loved to have slammed the Liliana. But again, here, I don't really want to just give them this free value on the Bolt. So I figure I can wait and see. And if I draw something like a second Ragavan, I can dash one, let them bolt it, play the second. But at the moment, it looks like they're flooding out pretty hard. Decided to just start holding lands for like a Liliana uptick. But we're just hoping to hit like another hand disruption spell. Second Ragavan, like I said, means I can just kind of dash this first one and see what happens. And then decide to just go ahead and play the second. If they've got a second removal spell, they were going to have it anyway. But at least when I play out the Ragavan, I know that they've used the removal spell that I know about. Then Wrenn and 6, pretty good there, because now they can start getting back this Zeotora's Proving Ground. And I've got nothing to go off of, so I'm pretty much going to give this like another draw or two. And it's kind of, if I hit a Lightning Bolt, we'll keep playing. If I don't hit a Lightning Bolt, we're just kind of dead here. Or like a Shadow would be a good draw. Dauthi's not the worst. It can exile the Proving Ground if they go to cycle that. But they do get another cycle off of it at the very least, so. So if we can rip like a Shadow off the top, we've got a reasonable chance. Shadow or a Goyf of our own. Then I'm dead to the Wrenn, so I just decided to Thought Seize for information. Like, maybe I find out they're on some card I wouldn't have thought about, like a, what is the Assault? The 3-mana red enchantment. Not Assault Formation. Y'all know what I'm thinking of. Sideboarding. Board out a few of these Wraiths with like Ragavan, Tarmogoyf, all those. Our life total's a little under duress, so I don't want to be too aggressive on it. A couple Inquisitions and a Dauthi, like they're removal heavy, they're hand disruption heavy. They're probably boarding out hand disruption. I kind of want to do the same thing to just make myself more threat dense. And then I'm boarding out a single Lightning Bolt and 2 Temur Battle Rage. Battle Rage is really bad against spot removal decks that can kill your guys in response to the Battle Rage. And then Lightning Bolt, it interacts with Ragavan but doesn't kill Tarmogoyf. Doesn't kill a Wrenn that's ticked up or a Liliana that's ticked up. So it's pretty underwhelming overall. Some of my board ends: Croxa, the 2 copies of Terminate, 2 copies of Turok, K Command, and the 2 engineered explosives, and the Veil of Summer. So just stuff that'll give me 2-for-1s like Veil of Summer, Croxa, Turok, Kolaghan's Command, and then things like Terminate that can just kill a Goyf or Ragavan, whatever, no matter how big it is. Alright, so we are on the play for game 2. Opening hands just like Thoughtseize into Croxa into Liliana. It's about all we can ask for in a Jund mirror like this. We've got the Bauble to try to help find the 3rd land. We're going to be filling out our graveyard pretty aggressively. So, Wren's probably the most obvious take. Lightning Bolt we don't care too much about with this hand. Wrenn in 6 is probably the biggest value engine they've got here. We don't have a clean way of dealing with it. Turok, if they end up discarding us, like kicking Turok on turn 4, that's fine. We've already got Liliana down, and there's a reasonable chance we'll already have Turok or Croxa back. So, we saw they were drawing a Lightning Bolt. Let's go ahead and try to get something out of their hand. Discard that forest. Alright, so we know at the moment they've got 2 more lands, and we're just trying to keep them from, or get ourselves in a position to, like, kick Turok. Not kick Turok, get back Croxa. Ugh, words. So I'm really glad that my opponent just decided to fire off their, that bolt there instead of, like, just keeping up mana and kicking the Turok. And they can absolutely double bolt this Shadow, but if they do that, then I don't have to worry about them, like, going crazy on my face. But obviously, it's a little bit dicey here with Wrenn because they have Lethal Burn in hand. Wrenn, Ping, Double Bolt. But then they don't activate Wrenn, which I'm assuming is just like a oops, should have, didn't. But it does mean I get to cleanly answer the Wrenn. Get down Goyf. They've got Turok here. I discard my answer to Turok, but to get to keep the other Turok. And then look up and realize, oh, we got a 6/6 Shadow, a 6/7 Goyf, because they discarded Planeswalker. We killed their Wrenn. And now we just have lethal with this Dismember into attack. So we would have been dead if they had activated their Wrenn and pinged us, but I'm guessing they just glossed over it and did not. Then game 3. I don't think I change up much sideboarding on the play versus the draw. I might bring in, I might do like this and take out a Turok, bring in an Inquisition on the draw. Just because they've got like Wrenn in 6, Liliana, a bunch of those like Haymaker spells. So having one extra way to interact with those on the draw is kind of nice. So this hand just deals with Ragavan, deals with at least one annoying Planeswalker. Speaking of annoying Planeswalker. So they decided to play this Proving Ground that I don't know about. Which is pretty nice because it means they don't just play out the Tarmogoyf there. They didn't have green. So pretty good reason to not play out Tarmogoyf. There's Swamp. They ditched the Mountain. There's the Goyf. So I know 2 of their 3 cards currently. We're going to have to just terminate this Goyf. If there was an instant in the yard already, we could have dismembered it, but there wasn't, so SOL there. And now the plan is we're going to have to eat the discard off the Turok. We can kill it, but we just have to hope that we either keep an answer in hand to this Fury or find something that answers it. But just escaping Croaks is pretty good too. So we know their last card is Fury, which we're not that afraid of. Like, if they want to block and trade like this, then we know we're going to be able to escape the Croaksa pretty quickly. Go to their draw step, fire off this K command. And I decided to just get the Croaksa back for the trigger here. I know I can't escape it this upcoming turn unless I hit like a Thoughtseize or an Inquisition. And I don't really want to fire that off blindly anyway. So instead, we'll just like get the Croaksa for the 3 damage trigger. Play this Turok we draw into. Alright. So really good Thoughtseize. Gets to hit Riveteer's Charm Liliana. So we know we get to take one. This is going to give us the card in the yard we need to escape the Croaksa. So we get to do all this. We get to grow Turok twice, which means it can attack into Seasoned Pyromancer. Alright, so Den of the Bugbears. This is where it gets kind of fun. I know they've got Seasoned Pyromancer in the yard to get back. So they can make 2 tokens. We can attack with both, which means they have to go chump chump. And then play out the Ragavan to block Den. We're dead to exactly Lightning Bolt or Fatal Push. A 1-mana removal spell that takes out Ragavan and then lets him activate the Den, because then the Den's a 3-2, makes a 1-1. It's 4 exactly. Other options are we can attack with Croaksa, deal the 3 on the trigger. They get back tokens. They have to block with 1. We cast the Ragavan and pass. We're not dead to a 1-mana removal spell. But we are dead to a Lightning Bolt. So we're not dead to Fatal Push. We play around Fatal Push, but we don't play around Lightning Bolt. So if we play out the Ragavan, they draw Lightning Bolt. They just get to animate Den, attack with the Den, the token from the Seasoned Pyromancer, and the token that the Den creates. 3 attackers. We got 2 blockers. 1 damage gets through. They bolt us. Game over. So Fatal Push is the only thing we get to play around if we just attack with the Croaksa that we couldn't otherwise. So instead, we're just going to put our opponent on like a 1-turn Hail Mary clock. Like, you're getting rid of both of your tokens off this Spyro. It makes both Croaksa and Turok lethal attackers next turn. And we'll get to play the Ragavan afterwards. We can't dash the monkey here, because then we're just dead to the Den of the Bugbears on the crackback. So we have to just play the Ragavan, say go. Fire up Den, so of course I'm thinking, alright, they found Bolt or something. But if they had the Bolt, they would have just cast it pre-combat and like guaranteed the kill. There's no reason to wait. So they just play the land second main phase, and we come away with that one. So that's 2-0. Let's go to match number 3. Alright, on the play. Opening hand. Couple lands. Thoughtseize into Tarmogoyf. Bauble to try to find a 3rd land. Interaction. About as good of a hand as you can get out of Jund Shadow. I'll often say that, like, I prefer these hand disruption into Goyf hands over, like, Ragavan into something. Just because there's a lot of times that people only have like one way of interacting with a Goyf, and if you can just get it down, it can run over from there. So we'll take Ragavan, just like scariest thing on board. And I believe we're just going to Windmill Slam Goyf here. Get it down under Counter Spell. It's bigger than Lightning Bolt can deal with. They're at least a card type off of Delirium so far. Except they end up hitting the bauble. And then what we can do here, if your concern is Unholy Heat specifically, you can cast this this Liliana into the counter spell, let them counter it, grows Goyf to a 6/7, and you don't have to worry about Unholy Heat until they have a Delve threat. But me personally, I usually prefer the route of like multi-spelling if I can. And I really want to save this Liliana as like an answer to a resolved Murktide. So we know Counterspell's gone. So them firing off that bolt there like guarantees that this is Murktide following it up, and they're just trying to outgrow Tarmogoyf. But as we see here, this is pretty fine because of Liliana. Let's just go get tapped Shockland. Get rid of the Murktide. Crack in with Goyf. So we know the Bolt's gone, the Island's gone. So they've got 3 unknown cards. Expressive Iteration is reasonable, but them like not hitting the land here is pretty fantastic for us. Because we're just going to have a free attack in, put them down to 1, and then Bolt is actually going to grow the Tarmogoyf here, so that's going to end up being lethal. So, I guess I should have specified, put them down to virtual 1, because we'd have 4, 2 is 6, Bolt for 3 is 9. But before damage, I realized, oh, nobody's got an instant in the yard, so we can just bolt them for lethal here. And if they got a Spell Pierce, then whatever. We've got Ragavan, Goyf, blah, blah, blah. So, let's go to game 2. Sideboarding against Murktide. Dauthi, I think, is pretty overrated in the matchup. It's like great if they have no interaction whatsoever, but you know Murktide, they've got interaction. They always have interaction. And Dauthi just dies to every spell imaginable. Street Wraiths come out, or some number come out, because it is a bit of a race with like Gurmag, and or not Murktide, Ledger Shredder, Dragon's Rage Channeler, that kind of stuff. Board out a couple Inquisitions because it doesn't hit Murktide, which is just like the biggest question mark in the matchup. Board out a couple Temur Battle Rage because like Brazen Borrower, Dress Down on Tarmogoyf, and like Otawara can kind of neuter that plan. Plus they just have a ton of counter spells. Board ends. Bring in a single copy of Turok, the Kolaghan's Command to deal with like opposing unlicensed hearses. The 2 Terminate, great answer for Murktide itself. Usually try to have 1 Kroxa in the matchup, so I bring in one here. I don't like having 2, so if I have 2 in the main, I'll board 1 out. But if I've got 1 in the sideboard, I'll bring it in. Then the Soul Guide Lantern, 1 of the Engineered Explosives, and the Veil of Summer. Could very easily bring in the extra EE. I like it better on the play than the draw, though. Because if your opponent goes like turn 2 Ledger Shredder on the play, and you don't have a Bolt or a Fatal Push, and like you're relying on EE, it can be pretty bad for you. Alright. So this is one of those stereotypical, like, please don't have Ragavan hands. Crap. It's like a hand that's solid if your opponent doesn't have something extremely impactful on turn 1, which obviously Ragavan fits that bill pretty aggressively. Take counter spells so we can try to jam the Tarmogoyf on turn 2. We only have one other land, so hopefully if we jam Tarmogoyf, it can stonewall this Ragavan and not let him find the third land immediately for Jace. Get the forest just to kind of freely play around Blood Moon. And they find the land, so this is pretty well going to be game over. Like Jace on an empty board, and we don't have an answer for it. So we'll get just kind of like aggressively click through here. We do have a little bit of a chance here, because I think it's this upcoming turn. We're just like, if we kick Turok, we outgrow Ragavan, get a couple cards out of hand. Maybe they can't block, but the likelihood of them having a counter spell is pretty high, so we're just going to scoop it up at that. We could double Goyf, but with like Ragavan hitting, Jace can get a third unsummon. They've got Expressive Iteration. It's just not going to be enough. Like, you really need to get a turn there where they just don't have it. And that was kind of my hope there, is that they just didn't have the counter spell. I could get the Turok down, get like maybe Expressive Iteration out of hand. Alright, so on the play, got a Ragavan on turn 1. We got a bunch of baubles in this Kroxa. So, reasonable keep. We got a bunch of looks at like actual interaction. Decide to keep the Veil of Summer. It's good if our opponent has like a Archmage's Charm and they want to steal Ragavan, or if they've got a counter spell sometime in the next couple turns for an important piece of interaction. So we offer up the Ragavan trade. Usually I kind of offer it up pretty aggressively if I'm on the play. And I have like a backup threat like this Tarmogoyf. So opponent gets to heat my Goyf. Which is okay here, especially now that I draw Thoughtseize. Because now I can just start like hitting everything. Like, alright, I'm going to Kroxa, you've got to consider. And all I've got to do is hope that you don't hit Counterspell off of your consider. And like, if you don't do that, I should be in an okay spot. Magus is pretty good, but we've got the basic swamp here. Then obviously top decking Ragavan's great, because either, hey, you let this go and I get to escape Kroxa next turn, or you don't let it go and I get to hit you with a Ragavan. And important about this list is we are running basic forest. And then we just got to hope this Ragavan like doesn't hit anything great. Renin 6 is fine. So here it's if they don't crack this bauble on their turn, then we know we get to escape this Kroxa and get rid of the Ragavan. So I think that's one of the few times that you should crack the bauble on your own turn. It was like, you know, I've got the Kroxa. This isn't maybe he's got it, maybe he doesn't. No, it's there. And maybe Ragavan's not the best thing in your hand at this point. But at least give yourself the option of what to choose instead of like having to get one thing or the other. So it looks like Murktide. Murktide with one card in hand. And it's a land. That means that we get to force this. We don't force the chump block, but obviously if they don't block, they're dead to bolt. So they decide to, which means we get to bolt the Murktide and then just like immediately re-escape the Kroxa. And opponent's got one draw step to deal with the Kroxa, which they find a land and concede. So that is a pretty big recurring theme with this deck, is like, I'm going to give my opponent one draw step to try to find the thing that deals with me. And if they don't, I'm going to win. If they do, I can't say no to it anyway. So I'm not running any sort of counter magic. Alright, one lander on the draw. We've got Hand Disruption. We got a Ragavan. Got a Shadow. Pretty reasonable. Opponent reveals Kahira, so they're either on elementals or blue-white control, or you'll see like what's it called? Charbelcher occasionally play Kahira. But Hallowed Fountain pretty assuredly means blue-white control. Alright, so this is like one of my favorite points in this matchup. The level 0 play is just, I've got a Ragavan, I need lands, or I need mana, play the Ragavan. I think the better play here is the Hand Disruption, because if your opponent just has like a Chalice of the Void, the game's over. Like, you played a turn 1 Ragavan, they untap, play a land, Chalice of the Void on 1, game ends on the spot. So Hand Disruption here on 1 means turn 2 you can go like second Hand Disruption, hard cast Ragavan, and what do you know, they've got a Chalice of the Void. I've also got Subtlety, double Subtlety in the main, which is interesting. So Prismatic Ending, Narset, double Subtlety. Draw Temur Battle Rage. Isn't like worst thing in the world. It's not great, but. So let's Thoughtseize. Decide to just take one of the Narsets here. And then next turn, if they want to Prismatic Ending the Ragavan, then I can like Thoughtseize the other Narset and play Shadow. Or if I find a land, I can just go triple spell. But essentially, I just want to make sure this Shadow gets down at a point where I think I can untap in one turn and get the kill with Battle Rage. Like, I really don't want to have a situation where, like, I play Shadow into known Narset plus Prismatic Ending or something, and opponent starts running away with it. Alright, so we know about Subtlety. We know their hand is just double Subtlety here. So our best bet is just to be aggressive. Like, they've got nothing they can do besides Subtlety. So there's no reason not to cast Subtlety the first chance I give them. I'm going to put that Shadow on the bottom because I would like to find a fetch land to make this Battle Rage lethal next turn. All we're hoping for is like one turn without Supreme Verdict. But they decide to go for the add Kahira to hand. Alright. And then we find the fetch land, which means Shadow plus Battle Rage. Shadow's a 7/7 there. We're at 6 life. So either one they block, we just Battle Rage the other one. And get on through for lethal. Alright, so that was game 1. This is game 2 against Blue-White Control. Sideboarding. Board out a lot of this spot removal, like Dismember, Fatal Pushes, usually Trim on like Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt can finish off a Planeswalker, but most of the time, if a Planeswalker hits, it's going to do the job that like decimates you anyway. Like if it Teferi lands and bounces your threat, you're behind a lot, even if you Lightning Bolt kill that Teferi. So the best way to interact with Teferi is put yourself in a position where Teferi come down, bounce a threat, doesn't just like stonewall you. So I would rather answer Teferi with just like having more creatures than try to answer Teferi with a Lightning Bolt after it's resolved. Same thing with like a Jace or Big Teferi or anything like that. Board out a Battle Rage. A lot of the time I recommend keeping the second Battle Rage in just to give yourself that out of like, hey, I had Fetch Shock Thoughtseize into Fetch Shock Thoughtseize Shadow into Fetch Shock Thoughtseize Battle Rage, and my opponent just died. Because even against decks like Blue-White Control, they can have hands that just don't beat that. Like you turn 1, take their Prismatic Ending, turn 2, take their 3-mana Teferi, get your Shadow down. Turn 3, take their Supreme Verdict Battle Rage. And, like, you hit them pretty good on curve there. Board ends the Veil of Summer. I board in the Engineered Explosives here, especially if they showed me main deck Chalice of the Void. I really want an out to that in the deck. I do bring in the K command too, but I kind of like having at least 2 outs. In this case, I decided to go for 3 because EE can also hit Narset. So the 2 EE, the Veil of Summer, the Kroxa, the 2 Turoks, and the K command for 2 of these Dauthis. They're not really living or doing much. Dismember, 2 Fatal Push, 1 Bolt, 1 Battle Rage. Yeah. Alright, so opening hand. Hand Disruption into Ren, Goyf. It's reasonable. Like, we're not getting a whole lot better than this. Obviously, a Ragavan would be nice, but I'm not going to throw back, like, a good functional hand that has Hand Disruption, a threat, something, a hard permanent to deal with. So, kind of like I said, sometimes you just have those Battle Rage hands of like take Prismatic Ending and then Teferi and then Supreme Verdict or maybe Subtlety, whatever. So, we'll just kind of climb the ladder a little bit here. I love how MTGO gets like laggy on these replays. I think that's a little funny. Alright. So let's get down Ren. Start pinging up. So Turok's a really good pickup. Hopefully we can just like kick that on turn 4. And then the hope here is if my opponent goes like down tick Teferi on Tarmogoyf, then I can just Ren ping the Teferi and like untap and kick Turok. But they've got Subtlety, which I'm pretty sure we saw 2 copies of Subtlety, yeah, and a Solitude. So those are gone. Basically, it's not a great spot, but at least we've got, like, the Teferi off the board. And Ragavan means we can dash, and if they go for subtlety, we can bolt it. Decide to keep the Ragavan on top. Like, we're just trying to get to a spot where we can resolve this kick Turok. That's kind of like goal numero uno. Then dash this Ragavan, because if they want to place Solitude and exile it, that's fine. They decide to subtlety, which is fine. So we decide to get rid of the Ragavan here. It's kind of served its purpose. It's gotten these subtleties out of hand. One goes for the Teferi, so we're going to respond with this Veil of Summer so that they can't bounce our Tarmogoyf. Also means that they're pretty likely to try to block with this Subtlety. Because, you know, blue-white control players and their Teferis, like, even if they have a chance to kill the Wrenn in 6, they don't want to give up their Teferi. But this is pretty much just the spot that we've been trying to wait for, where we can have our kick Turok. So let's start with attack at Teferi. Because if we get to make them discard this, or give up this subtlety for free, and that's great for us. We'll kick Dauthi. Play Dauthi, kick Turok. We're kind of giving our opponent like 2 draws at finding a Supreme Verdict right here, which is more than I would like to give them, but worst case scenario, if they do find one, then potentially we get to recover a little bit from it. Like in this case, if they had Teferi bounced something and drawn into the Supreme Verdict, we would have at least gotten the second creature back to our hand. Alright, so Wrenn's going to ping off the Teferi. Turok and Tarmogoyf can get in there. Technically, I should have cycled the Street Wraith before I attack, because if I hit exactly Kolaghan's command or Kropsa, then I would want to play that pre-combat to grow the Turok. But it's like 1 point in a matchup that's, or a point in the matchup that's probably not going to be decided by 1 point. So opponent draws off of their Jace. I can't really think of anything they've got here that's going to stop me from killing them. So we're just going to ignore the Jace and point everything at them. Because ultimately, if they do deal with like the Tarmogoyf, then I've got 7 coming through and a Wrenn ping. I don't think for 2 mana, 2 cards, they can deal with 2 creatures. So we get in there, move to 4-0. So last round of this league. Opening hand, pretty decent. We've got like the double Wraith to help get Shadow out quick. We've got threats. Opponent moles to 6. Obviously, we'd like to see a hand disruption spell here. So, punt number 1. I should have, not even punt, like I should have fetched before I cycled. Misty Rainforest isn't going to make anybody think burn, but technically there's like a very marginal thin percentage by fetching first before cycling. And since I drew the Blood Crypt, I didn't need another land. So my initial thought was that they were on like Murktide. If they play a blue fetch land, no companion pass with Ketria Triome, then my guess is either like an Indomitable Creativity list or perhaps a Rhinos list. So we'll just play out the Goyf. And it is, in fact, Rhinos. All right. So, not a great spot to be in. So we can play out Dauthi's Shadow. We're just going to sit back on this Street Wraith. See how they attack before we decide if we're cycling anything. So when they decide to swing all out, we're going to cycle the Wraith so we can kill this Rhino. Take the 6, go to 3. Like, we're pretty close to dead regardless. But we can trade out our Dauthi for 2 Rhinos of our own. So let's bobble ourselves, see if we've got a removal spell on top for a Rhino, which we do. Trade our Dauthi in for some Rhinos. So now we've got like Shadow Blocker Rhino, Rhino Blocker Rhino, Rhino Block, a Shardless Agent, Fatal Push, last Rhino, and they're getting through for 2 if they've got nothing. I should have Fatal Pushed on upkeep there, because there's a chance that they just drew a Force of Negation and I just give them like 1 less card to see it. And I also screwed up blocks here. I blocked Shadow on a Shardless Agent. It was free to block a Rhino on a Shardless Agent and a Shadow on a Rhino. Just to go ahead and keep a Rhino around. So that was a big mistake on my part. So I could have had a Rhino here with the Shadow, attacking for 16, putting them down to 2. And then Dauthi for 2 more Rhinos. And that's where the position I should have been in here. So they would have been able to fetch. Or, no, they wouldn't have been able to fetch both. They would have fetched once. And they ended up finding a Prismari command for lethal burn. So you get into this weird situation of the Rhino attack didn't matter because they wouldn't have gone down to lethal, and they could have drawn the burn spell to kill. But then the counter argument is they wouldn't have shuffled twice, so maybe that next card wasn't the lethal burn spell. It's too much to try to navigate through. The end of the discussion is like, I should have had 4 more damage on them and been in the same position. And I didn't. I personally take the opinion of it didn't matter. They drew the burn spell regardless. But to each their own. So sideboarding. Bring out a couple Wraiths and a couple Lilianas because they go too wide for Liliana. And especially with things like Shardless Agent, Lily Sack looks bad. A couple Wraiths because they're going to be aggressively getting to the board and turning things sideways. So I don't want to help them out too much. Board out some Lightning Bolts because it doesn't kill a Rhino ever. And then I board in the 2 copies of Chalice of the Void, 2 copies of Engineered Explosives, the Croxa, and the 2 copies of Terminate. Because the Terminates do kill Rhinos, unlike Lightning Bolt. Even if it costs 1 extra mana, being able to for sure kill a Rhino is kind of worth it. But EE and Chalice of the Void are ultimately the best cards we've got in the matchup. So this wins my opponent the game, starting with Gemstone Cavern. So now, like, I have to Thoughtseize instead of Ragavan. They've got a lot of 2-mana ways of dealing with Ragavan. So we've got Shardless, Violent Outburst, Endurance. So next turn, we're just going to have to take this Shardless Agent, play out our Ragavan, and find a way to deal with Endurance. But they've drawn a second Endurance, which means Tarmogoyf's pretty dead now. So instead of playing Goyf, we'll just play out Dauthi. They get down the first Endurance. And this is the part, I talked about it a little on stream. I feel like I've been losing a lot recently to Living End and Rhinos just doing like this fair game plan. Like, I'm not really losing to Rhinos that often, but I'm losing to just, like, this. Like, oh, my opponent just played an Endurance, and then a second Endurance, and then, like, a Subtlety or something. Alright. Don't really know why they decided to Endurance there, but it's fine. We'll get down EE. So we are going to have to, like, block an Endurance and take a hit off of these. Or hit off of one of these. And then they have Petty Theft for, Petty Theft for the EE. In hindsight, I probably should have just played out the Ragavan and the Tarmogoyf instead of dashing the Ragavan. Because now I'm dead to, like, any tap effect or an unsummon effect that I wasn't dead to last turn. And then the land I would have liked to have a little too late. But they've just got Brazen Borrower that's able to come in and block. And then they end up having third Endurance. So, like, none of it matters much anyway. But, yeah, just having, like, triple Endurance against this Ragavan Tarmogoyf hand and being able to start playing them turn 2 on the draw was a huge backbreaker there. Like, maybe I should have thought about taking Endurances sooner and just ripped those and, like, tried to fight through the Rhinos, just having a good-sized Tarmogoyf. But there's no guarantee I'm going to draw another EE. Like, maybe I could have gone turn 1, Thoughtseize, take Endurance, turn 2, play Dauthi, and then start, like, sacking Dauthi to their Rhinos to get more Rhinos. Maybe there's an argument for that, but ultimately I think my hand just, like, wasn't beating triple Endurance Brazen Borrower. And I kind of have to be okay with that. So, ended up that league 4-1. Some of the recommendations I would make if you're looking on playing the list going forward, I am running the basic Forest. I really like it. There is that little discrepancy with Croxa, but I don't think Croxa is... Croxa's like S tier in the Grixis Shadow Mirror, and that's about it. There's not a lot of just, like, fair matchups that can't deal with Croxa really well. Like, he's not great against Murktide because they get Unholy Heat and Unlicensed Hearse. He's not great against the control decks because they just get like Solitude and all that junk. So if my problem with the mana base is I've got one land in the 75 that kind of has a negative interaction with Kroxa, I'm kind of okay with that if I get to give myself more points playing around like Blood Moon and Magus of the Moon and that stuff. But ultimately, it's up to you. If you want to pick up Jund Shadow, I'd highly recommend this as like a place to start. I think Dauthi has really overperformed for me, and I think it's one of like those few highlight points that's really making Jund Shadow possible. There are a lot of leagues that you see like Dauthi and stuff, and it doesn't look great, but the card just gives you a ton of free wins against like Living End, Rhinos, like that blue-red Underworld Breach grinding station deck. We've won games against like 4-color by just exiling Omnaths and Solitudes. Wins games against Tron by hitting Karns and little Karns and stuff to shut them down, or big Karns to exile lands. Can win games against Amulet Titan by thought seizing a Titan and playing it out on your side. It's just got a lot of potential. I would recommend like trying it out before you just write it off as something you're not interested in. But that'll be it for that league. This should be up on YouTube pretty quickly. So hope everybody has an awesome rest of their weekend. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back live Monday, August 22nd. And yeah, that's about it. Come check it out live at twitch.tv/the_control freak. Catch you later.